Demons in movies, love them. Demons in real life, when they start talking to me, not so much. What is good, my friends? My name is Nicholas Playlog, and I'm going to be your host in today's video where we're going to be looking at the top 5 real messages from demons. Let's get into it. Number 5 is the demonic encounter that a boy named Patrick Antle had. Patrick is currently 23 years old, but it has taken him several years to speak out about his run-in with a demon that happened when he was 17. Living at his parents' house in Cincinnati at the time, Patrick decided to sneak out one evening and go to a local high school party. The sneaking out process worked out totally fine and he made it to the party safely, but it was on his way back though that he had the scariest moment of his life. He believes that the time was around 2 a.m. in the morning and he was walking back the way that he came. The area that he was in was rural and there weren't too many houses that he passed by. However, when he turned a corner down the second last street before his own, he saw a house on the side of the road. This wasn't unnatural obviously, but what stood out to him is that he swore that there was never a house here before. He stopped and glanced at it and noticed that the garage door was open. Only a few seconds had passed when out of the darkness of the garage door, 2 red glowing eyes appeared in the night. His initial instinct was to run, but right as he made eye contact with the red objects, his body froze up and he couldn't move. Standing stuck in the middle of the road, paralyzed, Patrick got struck with an overwhelming fear that his life might end right then and there. The eyes remained fixated on him, and after a few more seconds he heard a voice, but it wasn't coming from the garage. It sounded like it was coming from his own head. The voice was a deep, gravelly snarl that said, "Turn away now, or your body will burn in the deep fires of hell, and your soul will be tormented for eternity." Directly after that message had finished, his body freed up once again and he sprinted straight home. It took him over a month to build up the courage to go down that street again, but when he did, the home that he passed by, it was completely gone. Number 4 on this list are the text messages that Stephen Rossetti received when performing an exorcism. Stephen Rossetti is a priest and psychologist and is a well-respected member in the community, having appeared on many talk shows before. Something that he's well known for is performing exorcisms. In fact, Stephen performs roughly 20 exorcisms per week and has an entire team that helps him do this. Seeing as his main objective is to rid the world of possessive demons, it's fair to say that possessive demons as a whole, they aren't too friendly to him. During one of his more recent exorcisms where he was dealing with a teenage girl, he and the family of that girl received some very threatening messages. The messages read, "Her torments start now, priests all night. While you and that friend of yours sleep, we will make her bleed." They also went on to say, "We're glad that she's away from you now." The strange thing about this is that the messages came from that girl's phone, but when they looked on her phone to see, the messages couldn't be found. Rossetti believes that this was the work of the demons possessing that girl, attempting to stop him from performing the exorcism. Having reportedly seen somebody get clawed by a demon during an exorcism before, I think it's safe to say that receiving threatening messages from them would scare the best of us. Number 3 on this list is the interaction that an Australian Reddit user had with a demon roughly a year ago. This man in his late 20s works at a bike shop selling cycling gear and other bike related things. One morning he was going for an early morning bicycle ride at around 6 a.m. when he saw what he thought would be a hitchhiker on the side of the road. The hitchhiker was a woman, and as he describes her, was one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. She looked to be in her younger 20s with bright blue eyes, long flowing golden white hair, and extremely fair skin. Our protagonist approached her with a bottle of water and tried to hand it to her, asking if she was okay. She just stared at him without any sort of reaction at all. Thinking she might be petrified, he asked if she is running away from anywhere, like can he help her? Which she does reply to, no. Okay, so at least she's somewhat responsive, but the guy is starting to get a little bit freaked out. For starters, she hasn't blinked once during their entire interaction, and she looks completely unfazed. He asks a follow-up question, "Where are you going?" To which she replies, "Right here." They are completely in the middle of the Australian outback at this point without a single home or residence in sight. Why on earth would she be going here? It's at that point though that he says he realized every other sound in the entire world was silent. Crickets, birds, the wind, all other white noise, it was completely blocked out, and as she looked at him, he felt himself slipping into some deep hallucinogenic trance. He describes it as if he were in a dream, but also completely awake. At this point he says that his mind felt completely disassociated with his body, but he could still see and breathe. What he was seeing now though was that same woman as before, but her eyes had twisted to the back of her head, and she was still just staring at him with the veiny whites of the back of her eyeballs. Standing there in a complete daze, he had no idea what he could do to fight back, but just as quickly as it all came on, it was gone. And immediately, the white noise of crickets, birds, the feelings of his body rushed back to him. However, the beautiful woman was gone. And when he gathered himself enough to check his watch, it was just over 3 hours since he had started that conversation. Number 2 on this list is another message received during an exorcism. A televangelist and priest was flown from the United States all the way to Russia to deal with what was considered to be a deep possession from a demon. The goal was for the priest to perform an exorcism on this person and free their body from the demon spirit. Leading up to this point, it had become clear to the family of this woman, who was a little bit older than 30, that she had become possessed. Strange noises would come from her mouth in languages that she isn't familiar with. Her eyes would appear completely bloodshot, and even if you looked straight at her, it felt as if she was looking through you. She would also start randomly convulsing with no warning to anybody at all. When the exorcist arrived in Russia, he didn't waste any time in getting down to business. He had a Russian interpreter present so that his prayers would be translated and he could discern what she was speaking back to him. At the beginning, the lady was screaming and crying, which was offsetting to begin with, but roughly 2/3 into the ceremony, apparently she reached another level. Her body started shaking uncontrollably, like her family had described, and her eyes rolled to the back of her head. And then, without warning, she started screaming at the top of her lungs in a language that wasn't familiar to the interpreter. Finally, she turned to the exorcist and said in a deep, male voice that was not her own, "This is my domain. You are not allowed here, and you will suffer the lake of fire for your heresy." After that, the demon abandoned the lady's body and the exorcism finished. This story is roughly 30 years old, and it was not told by the priest, but actually by the priest's son, who was brought with him on this trip. The son was 8 years old at the time, and now 30 years later, he still claims that this is the scariest moment of his life. Number 1 on this list is the story from a Reddit user named Pebbletheif. This guy was 20 years old when he had what he describes to be the scariest encounter of his life with a demon. Using his fake ID at the time, he decides to skip work and instead spend the day partying with his girlfriend. Before going to the beach for the day, they decide to start the day off right by getting a drink at the bar. Very nice. When they arrive, the bar is empty. It hasn't even hit 10 a.m. at this point yet, so it isn't unnatural to have nobody there. After a few minutes though, a man enters and decides to sit directly in between the pair at the bar. Pretty strange considering the entire place was empty. The Reddit user describes the man as being extremely well dressed and very proper, not your usual suspect for a midweek early morning trip to the bar. The man starts moving his fingers strangely on the table, which captivates our Reddit user right up until the man says, in a very strange accent, "I notice you're a man who pays attention to detail. I'm also a man who pays attention to detail." It's at this point that the 20-year-old realizes the characteristics of this man. Piercing gray eyes, long sharp fingernails, and the incessant need to keep licking his lips. Getting slightly fearful of the situation, he tells his girlfriend to give them a minute, which she does without protest, clearly understanding that something is wrong here. It's at this point that the man turns directly to our Reddit user and says, "You were supposed to go fishing today. If you had, I would have drowned you in that ocean." Not only was that exactly where he was supposed to be, but the demon finished his statement with an animalistic hiss. He then said to him, "You can call me Jimmy C. I jumped off the San Francisco Bridge years ago, and we've been watching you." At that moment, apparently the man then uttered some guttural-like shriek from a language that our 20-year-old could not understand. He decided at this point that I think it was time to leave, but before he could get out, the man stopped him and said, "The next time that you see me, I'll be driving a black Mercedes and the license plate will say Utopia." This incident happened over 10 years ago, and since then, Pebbletheif has been petrified of seeing a black Mercedes. But both he and his girlfriend swear that that story is true and believe wholeheartedly that they were dealing with a demon. Well, there you have it, guys. That is our top 5 scary real messages from demons. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, what you thought about any of these stories, or if you, in your personal life, have ever had a run-in with a demon before. Remember to hit that like button, smash the subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.